On today's show, why I chose not to own a $1 billion business. I'm Jeremy Fisher. This is The Awakening. Back in 2017, I took an entrepreneurship class at my local college. The class was designed to teach wannabe entrepreneurs, also known as wantrepreneurs, how to go about the business of starting a business. The course material taught was what you'd expect from a college: basic accounting, finance, and business planning. The final project for the class was to write a completely fleshed out business plan for a business that you'd like to start, either theoretically or in real life. One of my classmates named Ben wanted to start a plumbing business. One of my other classmates, Jenna, wanted to start a sewing business. Most other students wanted to start a pretty standard business. The business plan that I wrote was for a business that the world had never seen before. One of the things our instructor had encouraged us to do was to identify a pain point in an existing business model and come up with a solution with our business that would provide a unique selling proposition. I knew from having a stepfather that worked in the car industry that one pain point people always had was buying cars at dealerships. Some people just didn't want to go through the hassle of dealing with a salesperson who could often be pushy when buying a car. Someone needs to create a car dealership where you don't need a salesperson to buy a car, I thought. Sure, you could buy cars from autotrader.com and ebay.com at the time, but you'd still be buying cars from an individual. The model that I had in mind was a car dealership that could be the red box for cars, or basically a car vending machine. The vehicle would be owned by a dealership, and you would never have to question the credibility of where you were buying the car, but you'd never have to deal directly with a salesperson, and the whole pressured car sales model would go away completely. I wrote this idea into a business plan, and that became what I submitted to the class instructor. My instructor was pretty floored. Jeremy, this is an incredible idea. You have to make this happen. I suggest you look into venture capital because this might require a lot of money to start up and scale, but once it does, it could change the way car buying is done forever. That really encouraged me. She gave me an A and sent me on my way. Something you probably know about me from listening to this show is I don't like risk. Everything I've ever done in the side hustle or entrepreneurial world has been designed with low or asymmetric risk. Knowing that I like a low risk approach, I realized that the venture capitalization model wasn't going to work for me. There was no way, no matter how good this idea was, that I'd go ask people to invest millions of dollars in my idea, because I knew that if the idea didn't work, I would have been responsible for those people losing more money than I would have ever risked myself. So I decided to bootstrap the car vending machine idea myself. Over the next several months, I ramped up the car flipping I was doing on the side to include higher volume and higher margins. I applied for and obtained a dealer's license. I signed a lease for a small dealership in my town. I bought a small inventory of vehicles. I familiarized myself with all the paperwork that comes along with owning and operating a dealership and selling cars, and I set up shop. The dealership was, we'll say, very humble. I purchased used office furniture at Goodwill and had a handmade sign sitting in the front window of the dealership. I named the business Auto Buy. I thought that was clever because auto was a pun, both meaning automobile and also the automatic nature of buying a car like I planned to set up. When I opened the doors to my business because of my success in car flipping, I was sure that the next few months would lead to huge growth. I'd be able to hire staff, build this into a profitable dealership, and with the money I was earning, make the investments needed in the infrastructure to make the car vending machine idea come to life. I really believed that all of this would happen within a year or two. And then I opened the doors to my dealership. And crickets. Instead of hearing the sound of footsteps beating their way into my dealership, I heard nothing. For the first week, no one even came to my dealership. By the second week, I had one person call and ask about a vehicle that was eventually a no-show, and that was it. In the first 2 months, I had sold 0 cars. I didn't even understand how that was possible because I had been car flipping on the side for years at that point and never went more than a few weeks without being able to sell a car. Then I realized something. People who buy cars from dealerships are not the same people who buy cars from individuals. People who had bought from me as a side car flipper wanted to deal directly with the person who had owned the car, which was me. People who buy from dealerships want to deal with a business that has credibility. My handmade business sign and secondhand furniture didn't give people much hope that buying a car from me would be a good idea. In order to build up a group of people who trusted me and building credibility, that would take time. It could take years. And once I had actually built up credibility with those people, it could take several more years to actually build the business large enough to make enough money to do the research, development, and execution on my car vending machine model. On top of that, the regulations for car dealers in my state changed, and car dealerships began to take on huge liabilities. Basically, any possible thing that ever went wrong with a car could become the dealership's responsibility, which meant that one bad deal that went to litigation could completely bankrupt my humble little car lot. Sure, bonding and insurance exists for that, but that was really expensive and didn't fully cover you from the liabilities that you could incur. It had become really clear to me that in order to make a car vending machine business work, I would not be able to do it with a bootstrap model. I was going to have to get venture capital funding. I wrestled with this for many days until I finally decided that I just wasn't wired for venture capital, no matter how much I wanted to be. The bottom line was, if I had $10 million, would I take that $10 million and put it into this car vending machine idea, not knowing if it would actually work and being fully comfortable that all of those millions of dollars would be gone if the idea failed? The answer to that question was no. So I couldn't ask someone else for millions of dollars to start my business when, if I had the millions of dollars myself, I wouldn't have risked it. And if the car vending machine couldn't happen without venture funding, there was no reason for me to pursue it, which meant there was no reason for me to keep my dealership open. I closed the doors, sold my inventory, and unregistered the name AutoBuy. The car vending machine idea might sound a little familiar to you. That's because today, there's a very popular business that's doing this exact thing. It's called Carvana. Carvana is a publicly traded company started by Ernest Garcia, Ryan Keaton, and Ben Huston. Carvana was founded in 2012, a full 5 years after my AutoBuy experience. The founders went to Drive Time Automotive Group and raised millions in funding to launch their first car vending machine in November of 2013. In 2015, a fully automated, coin-operated version of the signature car vending machine opened in Nashville, Tennessee. In 2017, the company went public. In 2020, it sold over 240,000 vehicles and posted an annual revenue of $5.5 billion, making it the second largest used car retailer in the U.S. It's a funny thing to watch an idea you've had gain traction and grow by someone other than yourself. It's also not the first time that it's happened to me. Several years after my AutoBuy experience, I realized that podcasting was probably going to be a huge hit, so I decided to start my own. The idea for the podcast was to interview entrepreneurs every day of the week and talk about what strategies have worked for them. After realizing that scheduling, recording, and interviewing a brand new entrepreneur every single day wouldn't fit the other things I had going on in my life, I decided not to start the podcast and pursue another idea. 1 year later, John Lee Dumas started a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire, which has had millions of downloads and led to a very good business for him. Not long after that, I realized my obsession with side hustles could be turned into a daily podcast where I told very short, simple stories of people who were side hustling. Again, for the same reason I didn't start the Daily Entrepreneur podcast, I didn't start the Side Hustle podcast. The idea just didn't fit into my life at the time. Then Chris Guillebeau of Side Hustle School started a podcast doing that. And again, his podcast became very successful and has provided a great income for him. This process of having an idea but not pursuing it because it didn't fit into my life is something that you might think is one that few people have experienced. It's probably also something you think I might regret. Neither of those things are true. Lots and lots of other people have had really good ideas that weren't right for them, and I don't regret not pursuing those ideas. Here's why. One thing that's really important for you and I to realize is that a good idea has to be good for you or me. Otherwise, it's a bad idea. Not a bad idea in general, just a bad idea for you or me. Carvana was a really good idea, but it wasn't a good idea for me. And this is still true today, even with Carvana being the success that it is. Carvana has yet to make more money than it has raised and spent in the nearly 10 years it's been in business. There's no possible way I'd be good at running a business that didn't make a profit in nearly a decade. Amazon didn't make a profit for a really long time because the goal with Amazon was to disrupt the market first, then make money later when all their competitors were gone. Carvana's working the same model, and it very well may work for them. But I wouldn't be able to do that. My brain just doesn't work that way. Show me 10 years of making no money, and I'd say that's 10 years I would stress out every single day trying to figure out how to make it make money. When John Lee Dumas was spending 80-hour weeks putting together the interviews needed for Entrepreneur on Fire back in 2013, I was on a journey of work-life balance and romance because that's the year I met my wife, who at the time was a workaholic. If I'd been working the 80-hour weeks needed to start Entrepreneur on Fire, I wouldn't have had any time left over for my wife, and we might not have ended up together. That would have been way worse than any other eventuality that could have come from a successful podcast. Okay, so what's the point of this episode? Something that's really, really important for people like you and me, which are people who like ideas and can recognize a good idea, is that sometimes we can't recognize whether or not an idea is a good idea for us. There are generally good ideas, and then there are good ideas for you. And this carries across your entire life. A good idea in general is to save or invest every penny that you can. That's just a good general idea. But a good idea for you might be to choose to spend some of those pennies giving a gift to someone that you love. A good idea in general is to work like crazy when you're trying to start or build a side hustle. But a good idea for you might be to take a few days off and relax every week to give yourself the space not to work like crazy. A good idea in general is to maintain friendships with others. But a good idea for you might be to spend less time around people if they're not supportive of what you want to do in life. The responsibility is on you and I to filter those generally good ideas out and find the ones that are good for us. The thing about the right idea is you usually know it when you see it. Do I have any regrets for not starting a multi-billion-dollar company like Carvana and trading the life that I have now to be in the position that I would have been starting that company? No. I'm exactly where I need to be. And in case you're wondering what the right idea ultimately was for me, well, you're listening to it. That's it for today's show. If opportunity doesn't come knocking, let's build a door.